Good evening. Good evening, Sir Joshi. Good evening, Miss Ria.
Good evening,
Ben.
sir. Good evening, sir.
Bame.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Hello, Bajoshi. Miss Persara and Miss Ria. Miss Persara and Miss Ria will start the program. So I'll leave it to them. They'll start the program. Miss Ria is there. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Hello, Miss Ria. Hello?
Yes, ma'am. We're waiting for Miss Sarah.
Okay, has she joined?
Not yet, not yet.
Okay. Okay, so we'll give her a few more minutes. Ma?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Miss Sarah, we can start now.
Hello everyone. A very good evening to one and all. On behalf of the Counselling Cell of Synod College, I would like to welcome each and every one of you to this special session this evening entitled Real-Time Resilience During Coronavirus Times. So we live in trying times. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, many of us have directly or indirectly been reeling under its effects. Pandemics are a burden not only on the economy, but on medical and social development as well. But most importantly, it also affects the mental well-being of people. Because of the novelty of this disease and its effects, we are experiencing something that we have never experienced before. And this new normal mode of living has generated panic and confusion, fear and anxiety. And many of us, including our young students, are facing various kinds of challenges that are stressful, isolating, and overwhelming. Keeping all this in mind, the counseling cell feels the need to extend support and reach out to the student community, as well as the faculty members, especially those who are going through difficult times at the present moment. So the purpose of today's session is to help find ways to cope with the ill effects of the pandemic so that we come out of it better and stronger and more resilient. So before we begin, I would like to invite Dr. G. Lingdo, coordinator of IQEC, to kindly say a few words.
Thank you so much, Dr. Persara. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the principal, the vice principals, and the entire Synod College family, I want to take this opportunity to greet and to welcome all of you to this online interactive session, which is organized by the Counselling Cell of Synod College. As already mentioned by our chairperson, we are living in very, very difficult, very unprecedented times in the history of our generation. Never before, at least for most of us, have we experienced a situation such as the one that we are experiencing today. Difficult, painful, confusing times that have taxed our bodies, our hearts, our minds in a very, very, in the most difficult possible ways. And we have experienced, and perhaps most of us are experiencing, even as we speak, stress, anxieties, perhaps sickness, pain, loss, death, grief in our own families, in our own lives, and in the lives of others around us. So, in such a situation, how do we cope? How do we face the challenge of the times with resilience, with hope, with courage? Keeping all these issues, all these needs in mind, the Counselling Cell of Synod College has very aptly chosen to respond to the need and has therefore organized this very special program. And for that, we are extremely grateful. My hope and my prayer is that this session that we are going to have today will not be the end, but it will actually be the beginning of a very, very meaningful time of interaction and helping our student community right here in our own college, but also the student community at large out there. You know, I'm saying the student community at large because we have chosen to keep and to make this program an open one so that it will not be restricted only to our own college, but that it will be of help and it will benefit others out there who need to hear, who will need to listen to the counsel and the expert and trained guidance of our resource person for this evening, Ms. Khasrasti. And having said that this program is meant especially for the students, I also would like to say that I know that this is something that will not only help the students, but everyone out there who's going through difficult times, myself included, because it's a daily battle just to stay afloat, you know, to keep oneself optimistic and positive when everything seems so dark. So I think the need of the hour is, for help, not just for our students, as I've said, but for the entire staff of the college and for everyone out there who have joined us and who will be joining us online will be joining us for the live stream as well. So on this note, I want to thank the organizers once again, the Counselling Cell of the college. I want to thank Ms. Naphisabet for responding to our call to partner with us in this venture. I want to appreciate the students who have joined, and we look forward to a very, very fruitful, a very meaningful and beneficial time for all of us. So thank you so much. I hope that this program will be a success. God bless all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Giri. I would like to remind our students that this session is especially meant for you. So if you have any thoughts or concerns that you would like to share, you can put them up in the chat box or ask questions later. And our resource person, Ms. Naphisabet, will address them at the end of the session. Now, without further ado, I request Dr. R. Lapasam to kindly introduce our resource person.
Good evening to one and all joining us in this program. We are so fortunate to have with us in this program Ms. Naphisabet Khasrasti, who will speak to us with regard to this topic. And it is a great pleasure for me to be able to introduce Ms. Khasrasti, who is going to talk to us on real-time resilience that we all require during these difficult times, especially with the ongoing pandemic. Ms. Khasrasti has completed her studies from Delhi University and the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore. She is a trained clinical psychologist and is actively involved in the care of mental health needs of children, adolescents, adults, and those struggling with substance abuse. She is currently pursuing her PhD at Mumbai and is also practicing at Sankya, Shillong. She strives to broaden her knowledge and expertise as a mental health professional, as well as to enrich her skills as a researcher. So I welcome you, ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for Synod College to invite me. And I understand that, the topic that has been given to me is quite a challenge, and I hope I can do justice to the topic. I'll try to share my screen. I hope you can see the screen. Hello? Oh. Am I not audible?
Yeah, you are audible, ma'am.
Okay.
But we cannot see are you sharing your screen with us? We cannot see it.
I'm sharing this screen. Yeah. So let me just try again. Silent the car is also presenting, and I think that is creating the problem.
Sir Joshi, can you help? Silent the car. Can you please stop sharing your screen? Silent the car. Hello. Silent the car. Can you kindly stop sharing your screen so that the resource person can?
All right, sure. All right. So now you can see, I hope.
Yeah, we can see.
Yes,
sorry, can you all see the screen now? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for inviting me to this occasion. So I hope I can do justice to this topic, and it's not a very easy thing to do at this point of time, but we all have to try to look for some sort of resilience and how we can deal with this pandemic. Now, as we all know, resilience is the ability to withstand and rebound from adversity. And as we all know, we are going through a very trying time at the moment, but we need to find ways to bounce back and deal with this. Now, when we talk about resilience, there are two things that we need to keep in mind. So the first is that resilience can be individual, which depends on our own strength. And the other side of resilience is also that is relational, and the strength that comes from relationships that we have with others. So as we know, as all of you have mentioned earlier, that this pandemic has given rise to a lot of stress for everyone. most of us feel very helpless, frustrated, and bored because of the lockdowns and the various other protocols that we need to follow. And because of all of these things, there's increased anxiety, depression, substance use, loneliness, and domestic violence. So apart from this, there are also certain gender-based violence that have been reported during this pandemic, and it was found that especially women are affected, but it's not exclusively they are not, it's not exclusive for women who to be subjected to this violence, but it comes in the form of domestic abuse, rape or sexual assault, commercial or other exploitations. And because of the restrictions of COVID, that is to stay at home, this may increase the opportunity for violence to occur if it's within the household, and also reduces the opportunity for people to seek help should they face this. But we have to understand that COVID is not the cause for the violence, but we need to somehow work through this, through these experiences that we have. Going on through this presentation, I think we need to keep in mind that it is very natural for each of us to feel stress, anxiety, grief, and worry during this time. And because there are certain factors that are affecting our mental health. For instance, there are certain factors which are directly influencing our mental health, that which include family problems, stigma, any health precondition, or financial problems. There are also other factors that are indirectly influencing our mental health, and these include fear of infection, work pressure. Now that most of us have to work from home, there's it becomes very difficult to keep aside a time to focus on our work. Sometimes because of information overload, we feel it affects our mental health, and also this lockdown and social isolation also indirectly affects our mental health. But we also have to look at not only the factors that are influencing our mental health, but also the protective factors, which include how we try to take things more positively, or being in touch spiritually, and also gaining support from our family or our community. So we all know what happens when we are stressed. For instance, we sometimes have feelings of fear, anger, sadness, worry, numbness, frustration. Sometimes there may be changes in our appetite or energy levels, or even things that we used to be interested in, we don't feel interested in when we are stressed out. Sometimes we may have difficulty sleeping, or we experience a lot of nightmares, so we don't feel fresh when we get up in the morning. Sometimes we may have physical reactions to stress. We may have more headaches or body pains, or other bodily problems. Sometimes there can be worsening of chronic health problems or mental health conditions, and also there may be increased use of tobacco, alcohol, and other substances. But we also need to remember that times like these, where there's a lot of stress and crisis, of course it challenges us, but it does not necessarily mean that that has to damage us. So now let's look at how we can cope with this stress and how each of us can build resilience. Now, one thing is that we can have more problem-focused coping. So problem-focused meaning we look at what is the problem at hand. We have we prepare for a practical solution to these things. We have an action plan, or we try out things or other strategies. Now, this could be in the form of, for instance, when we are feeling very stressed out or anxious because of news or updates that we keep on seeing every now and then. So if that is the case, we need to find a way to also take a break from watching or reading or listening to a lot of these news or updates, especially including the ones on social media, which all of us waste so much time, on social media these days, because that is the main form of entertainment. Now, yes, of course, knowledge is power, and it's always good for us to be informed, but constantly hearing about the pandemic can be very upsetting for each of us. So sometimes we need to consider limiting our consumption of news to just a couple of times a day, and maybe trying to find time to disconnect from our phones, our TVs, our computer screens, at least for a while. Now, another thing is that we also feel bored or frustrated because we are under this, maintaining, we have to maintain physical distance and lockdowns and all of that. Now, we have to remember that studies have found that self-care is also something which is very, very important in building resilience. Now, self-care is, available to each of us. Sometimes we can, try to take care of ourselves by just trying to relax and, maybe, do some stretching exercises, or maybe we can try to eat healthy rather than eating junk food, or, exercising regularly, getting plenty of sleep, avoid excessive use of alcohol, tobacco, and other substances, getting vaccinated when the vaccine is available, and also prayer also helps, and in taking care of ourselves. And also, if we try to cultivate gratitude, can also help us deal with these feelings of boredom or frustration. Now, sometimes, I mean, maybe all of you will be experiencing this at some point or the other. That is, you have difficulties trying to concentrate on your work, or even to complete your work. Now, if this is the case, we need to also try to look at ways to find time to sort of unwind. Because if we just focus on working all the time, our mind is not really present. So maybe sometimes we can try to do some other activities that we enjoy doing. Sometimes we can spend time in outdoor activities while maintaining physical distance. I mean, most of us are still very lucky that we still have space. We're not in buildings and flats where we can't even move out of the house. And also, it is important for us to maintain a routine or a schedule, because of course we have a lot of time in our hands. Being at home, we can do whatever we want, but at the same time, when we do not have a routine or a schedule for ourselves, sometimes we end up wasting a lot of time on doing very unnecessary things. Now, another thing is that sometimes we may feel lonely or alone. And, it is important for us to remember that even though we need to be physically distant from people, it is very, very important for us to remain socially connected. We can find ways and means to do that by talking with people whom we trust, or, about our concerns or feelings. We can find virtual ways of connecting or communicating. And because even studies have found that resilience is associated with perception of social support from family, friends, and significant others. And another thing is that we can also try to connect with our communities or faith-based organizations, which we can connect with them online or through social media or by phone or email, because it's not about only helping ourselves, but when we do try to help others cope with stress, it can also make us or our loved ones feel less lonely and isolated, because working together as one community can help create a feeling of solidarity in addressing this COVID situation together. Now, apart from this, some of us may also have to deal with having to quarantine ourselves or isolate ourselves. Now, if this is the case, we need more practical action, which means that we need to first try to anticipate our needs and make adequate provisions for ourselves, our family members, so that before going for isolation, so that we don't unnecessarily have to be anxious about being concerned about the basic needs, whether they're being met or not while we are under quarantine. Another thing is that when we are under quarantine, we need to stay connected and also maintain our social network, as I've mentioned earlier. We also need to pay attention to our own feelings and our own needs. And we need to also engage in healthy activities like exercise, regular sleep routines, and eating healthy food. Again, here we need to also avoid information overload, as I've mentioned earlier, and also to keep encouraging ourselves that even though if we are if we've tested positive with this illness, the mortality rate is pretty low, and if we follow the protocols that the healthcare workers have for us, we will soon be able to reconnect with our friends and our families. So what is important that even though we are doing this problem focused coping is that we need to also acknowledge our own feelings and not to bottle them up. So staying connected is very important. Now, there's another side to coping, that is emotion focused coping. This is how we manage our feelings, our thoughts, because like I mentioned earlier, most of us are feeling very stressed out, and because of this we can feel a lot of feelings of anger, helplessness, and fear, and other things as well. Now, hopelessness can come through because of this uncertainty. And the thing is that probably during this time, we need to cultivate patience in this time of uncertainty. I mean, I understand it's not an easy thing to do, but we need to try to work on that. Another thing is that we may face a lot of anxiety because of this uncertainty, and sometimes this anxiety can lead into a lot of anxiety attacks or panic attacks where we feel very breathless, and we sweat a lot, and we feel as if we're losing control. If this should happen, we need to try to take deep breaths and focus on the things that are under our control. 4 questions that could probably help us if we're experiencing a lot of anxiety or panic is that we need to ask ourselves, what is under my control at this point of time? For instance, what's going to happen, how long this pandemic is going to last, when this is going, when things can go back to normal. These are all questions that we have no answers for, and none of us have control over these questions. The question is, am I unnecessarily worrying about the worst case scenario and believing that it will actually come true? If this is the case, then probably we need to change what we are worrying or what we're believing in. The third thing is that how have I managed these feelings in the past? Because all of us have experienced anxiety at some point or the other, and we have been able to cope with it. So don't lose hope on yourself and not being able to cope with this anxiety at this point of time. Try to remember a time when you have dealt with stress and anxiety properly at one point of time. Now, the fourth question is that what can I do at this moment? And probably that can help us contain these feelings of anxiety or panic that we may be experiencing. Another thing that we may be facing right now is a lot of anger and adjustment problems, especially given that we need to be in touch with our, family for an extended period of time. And this is not a normal situation, because most of the time, even if we have disagreements or misunderstandings with within the family context, we can just move away or not deal with that. But at this point where we have to all the time interact, we may experience a lot of anger and disagreements. But the important thing that we need to remember here is that anger is very, very natural. It's very it's very human to feel anger sometimes. But the important thing is, how can we communicate this anger and this disagreement to the point where we do not end up hurting other people, or do we end up hurting ourselves? Now, how do we do this is learning how to communicate this anger or these disagreements by listening before we reacting. Most of us are used to reacting. When we are angry, we react. But the thing is, sometimes it is also important for us to listen and respond rather than react. The second thing is that we need to focus on having more open conversations with our family members, or with people around us whom we are experiencing this anger with, without being defensive, because most of the time we end up pointing the finger and we become very defensive, and that just closes that that open communication that we can have, and we can learn from each other, because we need to understand that even in times of anger, or even in times of disagreement, the aim is to understand each other rather than to prove who's right and who's wrong. Another difficult thing that we need to address during this time is also the grief that we face because of loss that we experience because of a loved one. And it becomes very difficult when we are grieving and at the same time trying to cope with feelings of fear and anxiety, and it can be very overwhelming for any of us. The way prevention protocols, what they have said also have changed the way we gather and the way we grieve together. So it becomes very difficult for us to sort of grieve together at this point of time. But we need to keep in mind that we can always connect with other people. And we can do this by maybe we can try to invite other people or host conference calls with our family members, our friends. Maybe we can ask our family members or our friends to share stories, pictures through email or through phone, through video chat or other apps and social media. We can coordinate a time and a date for the loved ones to honor the one whom we have lost by reading a selected poem, or a prayer, or maybe creating memories or rituals by developing like virtual memory book or blogs, or by asking family and members to and other family members to contribute their memories and stories about the loved ones. Or maybe we can do an activity like planting a tree or preparing a favorite meal that has significance to both you and the loved one whom you've lost. And also, it is also important for us to remember that we can always ask for help. Help is always available, and we can go for there are grief counseling services that are available, mental health services are available, support groups and helplines that could help you during this time. And we can also seek support from our community or our friends or leaders who can help us at this difficult time. Now, grief because of a loved one is something, but also distress can also come from other types of losses or change. It could be because of a loss of a job, or inability to connect in person with friends, family, or religious organizations, or maybe missing special events and milestones like graduations, weddings, or vacations. All of these things can have drastic changes in our ways of life and our routine. And we have to remember that grief is a universal emotion, and there's no right or wrong way of experiencing it. And all losses are significant, and nobody should feel guilty about experiencing grief or distress from any loss that they experience in their lives. So even at this time, we need to acknowledge our losses and feelings of grief, find ways to express these losses and grief, and find comfort maybe through art, writing, or talking to friends or family, cooking, music, and other creative practices. maybe we can develop new rituals in our daily routine to stay connected with our family or friends. If we're staying together with a family, maybe we can consider playing a board game or, you know, exercising together or something like that. Or maybe if we are, you know, staying separately, then we can consider interacting through phone calls or apps that allow for playing of games together virtually. See, all of these things are available to us. But the important thing that we need to remember is that we need to try to stay in the present, focus on the aspects in our lives that we have control over right now. And remember that whatever it is, you are doing your best at the moment. So now when we look at resilience in general, we have talked about problem-focused coping and emotion focused coping. But the important thing is that we need to remember to stay focused. Breathing can really help us, because breathing in calms our minds, and breathing out also calms our mind and our bodies. And we have to remember that studies have found that factors associated with resilience, like I mentioned earlier, like self-care, staying connected, or perceiving social support, and all of these things are related to modifiable factors. So how to keep going on? And so we need to keep on being flexible, being respecting the individual or our own needs, keep staying connected, keep in touch with our own values and what is important to us, not to forget that there's a whole world out there and we're just a part of it. Communicate, very important, rest, and also seek help if you need it. Now, I've just put up this 24 hours toll-free helpline that we have at Suncare, and anyone can call. You can be anonymous, and someone will be there to talk to you at any point of time if you're going through a difficult time. Now, to end this presentation, I just want to read this quote by Arundhati Roy that says that whatever it is, coronavirus has made the mighty kneel and brought the world to a halt. Our minds are still racing back and forth, longing for a return to normality, trying to stitch our future to our past and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine the world anew. This one is no different. So let's hope this quote gives us hope that we can, break through this pandemic and, and also create a new world through this experience. Thank you very much. So if there are any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. Are there any questions or anything you would like to say? Anyone?
Maybe I'll start with a question.
Sure.
Yes, Ms. Khasrasti, you've talked about self-care, you've talked about the need to have family support. But what if somebody who is without family or social support, is going through something difficult at the moment? How does that person cope?
I understand that, some of us have people around us, some of us don't. But the thing is that even if we don't, help is available, and there are different ways we can seek help. Like I put up earlier, there is a toll-free helpline there where people can connect, and we can sort of try to connect you to other organizations and other people who are helping out during this time. For instance, if it's with financial aid, or if it's with other things. But help is available, even though we may not have people around us, but we are not alone. Those laborers who don't have any job during these hard times. Okay, so how can we help? I can see there's one question here that Monica Khasrasti, how can we give advice to laborers who do not have any job during these hard times? Right, so there are organizations who are helping out, and I think the government is also helping out, giving some sort of financial support to people who are not being able to work at this point of time, or even for people who have lost their jobs. So certain organizations are available. I will have to get back to you, Monica, to find out exactly who is eligible for what.
Can I ask a question, Ms. Khasrasti? Yeah. See, one of the most, maybe the most difficult and painful aspect of this particular disease is the fact that we are forced to, to isolate the ones we love, especially when they are ill, when they are ailing, whether at home or in the hospital. And sometimes that loved one, I think most of us have experienced that loved one, passed away without ever knowing that they are loved, or without the comfort of a dear one, beside them when they go. So that is something that has left a wound in the hearts and the minds of family and others. So how do we cope with that? How do we come to terms with the fact that we are not able to say goodbye? How do we receive closure in such a case? Thank you.
So the thing is that I understand that it's very difficult for us to lose a loved one at this point, because sometimes especially if the person has passed, we have lost our loved one because of this illness. We are not allowed to be there to take care of our loved one during their last few days. But the thing is that we have to remember that, like you said, ma'am, that the person does not feel loved at that point of time. But I don't believe that's the case. And because the thing is that we don't really know what the other person is experiencing. And if it's our loved one, I think they know that it's not because we wish to not be there for them, but it's because we have to at this point of time. We need to respect the protocols that have been set for us and everything, because it is difficult, no doubt. But the thing is that how do we gain closure is that we need to stop telling ourselves that our loved one does not feel loved, because it's not only at the last few moments that we experience love. We have been with them throughout, and they probably have experienced that love throughout. But the thing is that at that point of time, I can't speak on their behalf, but I'm pretty sure that all of us understand at this point of time that it's not something we choose, but it's something that is necessary. I hope that answers your question, ma'am.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
And again, we need to also, it's not about the last few days that are important, but we can always, like I mentioned earlier, create a memory for them. We can, create certain rituals, because the normal way of grieving and the rituals that we're used to, we're not allowed to do that at this point. But we can create new rituals. We can, take part in certain activities, like, planting a tree or something like that, so that our loved ones the memory of our loved ones continue to stay with us for as long as possible.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Khasrasti, there's another question in the chat box.
Thank you.
Yes, if someone has a mental disorder, what can they do to avoid getting COVID?
So that mental disorder, if you mean mental illness, see, the thing is that when we look at mental illness, it's not the same. There are different types of mental illnesses. Now, the thing is that how should we avoid getting COVID? I think it's the same for all of us. How we avoid getting COVID is that we stay, we maintain physical distance, we wear our masks, and we sanitize as possible, as frequently as possible, and we stay home as unless necessary. Now, again, if someone has a mental illness, it depends on what kind of illness. I cannot answer that. If it's a severe mental illness, now there are different ways. We also have telemedicine, which a person can consult to a doctor or anyone whom they would wish to speak to. So you can go to our website that is under Suncare, and you can book an appointment, and you can meet a professional, and if required, there is a delivery system, and you can get the medicines without having to leave your home. That is one thing. And if a person has severe mental illnesses, then it is important for them to continue with their medication, even if they're getting vaccination. This vaccination and the medicines